Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast Channels 6 and 22. Channel 6 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 8, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
Good evening and welcome to the November 14th, 2023 edition of the Exeter Budget Recommendations Committee meeting. We'll start off with introductions. My name is Bob Kelly. I'm the chair of the committee and I'm on the Water and Sewer and the DPW General Subcommittee. Chris?
Hello, Chris Suter, Vice Chair, and I do Parks and Rec, Human Services, and Library. And I brought candy, so please help yourselves.
For my day.
Good evening, everyone. Corey Stevens, Finance Director.
Russell Dean, Town Manager.
Paul Philosophy, Interim Public Works Director.
Timothy Gwynn, Fire and Police.
Andrew Elliott, DPW General.
Amanda Kelly, I do DPW General, Parks and Rec, Library, and Health and Human Services.
Gardner Reeves, Water and Sewer Committee.
Chris Zigmont, Crestview Drive, and I'm on General Government.
And Anthony Zwan, 7 Marlborough Street on Water and Sewer Subcommittee.
Great, thank you and welcome everyone. Tonight we'll be talking about the water and sewer portions of the DPW budget. There are documents over on the table, the spreadsheet perspective of the subcommittee versus the preliminary budget that we received in September, as well as the subcommittee's narrative discussion and the Public Works Department's narrative of the description of what their department does, if you haven't already had a chance to look at those. So as the chair of the committee, I'll get into discussion, but Dr. Zwan and Darden Reeves assisted me in working with Public Works on developing our report. A variety of schedule glitches, so that it was sort of a hit or miss setup. Paul Vlasic was on vacation for a couple of weeks, and then Steve Dalton had some surgery. So we tried to fit in some discussions and meetings as best we could, but hopefully we'll have an interactive communication tonight. If you have any questions, and if Steve's, I have spoken with Steve both at a meeting and separately on some clarifications, so hopefully we're all on the same page, but if we're not, we can sort them out tonight. So we'll start off by just a quick introduction on the department. As with the DPW General discussions, there are a number of open staff positions in this department, which obviously makes a lot of the field work and the administrative work a little bit difficult. Paul is the interim Public Works Director, but he's in his full-time job as town engineer, and there's a lot of projects going on in town, so he's been sort of working two sides of that. And Steve is the assistant water and sewer manager. We lost our managing engineer last year, and Steve has been doing a great job of filling in and getting up to speed on a variety of issues. So there are some learning curves that we've gone through this year, and the subcommittee recognized that, but have some observations on some items. So we'll start on, this is on tab 4 of the budget book. Just to start with administration, nothing, no real changes, more just observations. The GIS position that this committee supported last year and was approved as part of the budget has not yet been filled. And right now, the water and sewer manager position, of which, again, Steve is the assistant right now, but the water sewer manager has not been formally filled as well. In administration, the biggest item is the reduction in consulting services. Most of this is regarding the lead pipe. As you may recall from last year, US EPA is requiring an inventory for older water supply systems of all lead pipe, of which we have some. And we do, by the end of October of next year, we need to have a full inventory and a plan for going forward and taking the lead pipe out of service. We did get a grant on this amount, and the $10,000 that's remaining is for our consultant, which has been selected. That, according to Steve, I think that project has just started. So we'll either be spending the $10,000 that's in the budget for, or some of the money from this year will be encumbered into next year to supplement the grant that we received.
Bob, may I speak to that?
Absolutely, Steve.
All of the money will be encumbered. That full $35,000, the contract that we have with Weston and Sampson is for $85,000. So that the grant was for $50,000, and the $35,000 that's in that line item right now, I just filled out a purchase order request to utilize the remaining $35,000 of that line item for the current signed contract with Weston and Sampson.
Excellent. Thank you for that update. Does that make sense to everyone? So that's all, and then just an item on the employee wellness. You'll see this on the sewer side as well. This is a new item for next year that with the field staff at Public Works, both in general as well as water and sewer, there's a lot of let's say, multiple shifts and the stresses associated with that, and closed space entry, and some other sort of particular stressful situations with field staff. And so we've entered into a program that will try to at least have some training associated with that component of their jobs. So any specific questions on the administration items?
And yes, just one, Mr. Chair. Going back over, I know we had a lot of discussion last year on the GIS position, and I think there was some discussion last year that the concern was going to be that the labor situation is difficult, and we're, here we are, and the position's still not filled as we, may have been able to project. Is there any proposition to change how we go about it, or broaden our search in different areas, or have we had applicants and it wasn't an appetizing salary, or what's sort of the overview of why we're still where we are?
Let me take that one. So, I'd like to start with this. We lost the director to retirement. There was some familiarity with the GIS and what some of the scope was for that. The water sewer manager at the time, very strong in GIS. My assistant that we were still advertising for was very good at GIS. So there's the trainers of our system right there. Yeah. And so my priorities would be to find an assistant town engineer and then look more in-depth for the GIS so that we have a better hierarchy of expertise. So my concentration was more on the higher levels and not necessarily at this position now because there would be less ability to train that position.
Makes sense.
Todd?
Follow-up question to that, just kind of procedurally. Are these positions all currently posted and advertised?
They are.
So it's not as though we're holding back on the recruitment of a GIS based on what Paul just represented. The position is out there.
No, we're actively recruiting for it.
I mean, I understand what Paul is saying. Your priorities are on the hierarchy. I totally get that.
But we are recruiting.
You're recruiting?
For it. Yes.
And would you care to answer the question about whether there were any nibbles in that regard?
We've had applicants for sure for the position. We just haven't hit the right qualified person yet.
Okay, so it's not a cold case. There's still some activity. Great.
Not a cold case.
Great.
Great. Corey, could you update us on the health insurance numbers?
Water Administration Health, $72,781, 72781. Dental, $5,492, 5492. Life insurance, 271. Long-term disability, 540. And all the way to the bottom, workers' comp insurance, 5,453, 5453.
And the total benefits?
146,759, 146,759.
Thank you.
There'll be some changes just below that as well, Bob.
Which would be?
Fleet insurance, 55124, goes to $443. And the line below, property insurance, goes to $60,435, 60435.
Okay. So the subcommittee made no changes on our own other than these. So the new general expenses total?
93,431, 93431.
And then a new admin total?
Yep. 535,388, 535,388.
I will move that number for discussion.
And I'll second it.
Further discussion on any of the items?
Just a little clarification, which I don't think is really necessary, but the employee wellness thing was explained to us, I think, by Steve, correct?
Correct.
That was not made up by the subcommittee. I think that's part of an effort, I think, on the part of the town, I think, a larger part of the town, and as Steve mentioned, also was tied into the Department of Labor inspection and some feedback relative to that bigger thing. Am I correct about that, Russ?
It's not directly related to Department of Labor per se, but it's wellness activities that are not covered by the town's health insurance carrier. So it would be like, general employee wellness.
Yeah. Okay.
I was just curious, what is the wellness program? I don't know if I was here when it was explained. I don't know if that was last year.
So these would be more for activities that are outside the town's insurance program. So if people wanted to take advantage of mental health enhancements and wellness, that would be part of this type of program.
Gotcha.
Andrew?
This is just a question, maybe about all of them, but the health insurance, is that assuming like a full payroll? Like, are all these numbers based on the 3 people that are not employed, or are they based on if you were fully decked?
So
They're position centered, so basically it goes with a position. So we don't reduce it because a position is vacant. We budget the full amount.
So the full amount would be here. So even if you were fully staffed, then this would cover all the staff. Okay, that's and if it doesn't, it goes into the general.
If a position is vacant, we assume it's going to be a family plan. So we assume a worst case scenario.
That's good. Families are the worst case
scenario.
Somebody had to say it.
We all thought it.
We have to do that because we don't know when we hire what will come down the wire.
And as a corollary to that, then when a position isn't, I mean, I kind of know the answer to this, but if a position isn't filled, then we're not paying the health insurance company for that. So the funds go back into the
reserve.
Into the reserve. Yeah. Okay. In this case, because it's water, it goes into the reserve.
Into the water fund reserve, yes.
And if it was part of the general government, it goes into the fund balance, or
yes.
What? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And just a highlight, it's in the report, but that large number under insurance reimbursed repairs, 55158, there was a pump that froze during that really harsh cold snap in February. And so we put in an insurance claim on it, and we received, I think, pretty close to full reimbursement on it, and that is added as a revenue item for the town to offset that. So seeing no further discussion, for the budget amount for water department admin, $535,388, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The subcommittee had no comments on billing.
Yeah.
So we'll get the new insurance numbers for that, Corey?
Sure. Water billing, health insurance, $28,031, 28031. Dental insurance, $1,869, 1869. Life insurance, $92. Long-term disability, $113. Workers' compensation insurance, $1,271, 1271.
And new total benefits?
51,477, 51477.
Okay.
Can I just ask a
Absolutely,
curiosity
Jim.
question? Why is there workers' comp insurance for billing department?
So the workers' comp insurance follows the employees. So basically, we have workers' comp in our general fund, in our water fund, in our sewer fund. So we will allocate out a certain amount of workers' comp insurance expense for the employees that are in this section.
Interesting.
Great question. May I follow up?
Sure.
So are you saying, Russ, that we have sort of a pooled workers' comp and you're divvying it out according to percentages, or is it based on the positions? Because we all know that a roofer pays more for workers' comp than someone that's an administrative person.
So when we have our workers' comp, they do a payroll audit, essentially, of by class of position.
Yeah.
And so we break that allocation out by the position class. So that's how you'll see it here. It's It's related to the position.
It's related to the description of the positions.
So I'm agreeing with what you're saying.
Yeah.
In terms of it's more for a roofer than it would be for a
And it's more for your workers in the water department than it is for your administrative
For
person.
certain types, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So just as a highlight, most of the increases in this division are consulting services, phone utilization, and software agreement, which the notes are pretty self-explanatory. This has nothing to do with increases. They're general allocations or percentages of other larger budget items. So that's how that's parsed out. And Corey, do you have a new general expenses number?
Will be the same.
It'll be the same, won't it?
56,627.
Got it. Yep. Okay. And then a new water billing total?
211,835, 211,835.
I'll move that.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. On to distribution, page 3. Mentioned in the note, we do have 8 full-time people allocated to this division, but we are currently short 3 people, which is why the salaries appear significantly underspent. And Corey, why don't we do the insurances?
Yes, water distribution health insurance, 88,568. Dental insurance, 5,646, 5646. Life insurance, 184,000. Workers' compensation, 10,135, 10135.
And a new benefits total?
161,341, 161,341.
Thank you. Okay. First item we had, the subcommittee had some comments on was building maintenance, 55022. Just in a review of the, this has been budgeted at $10,000 for a number of years, and Historically, on an average basis, it's in the $5,000 to $6,000 range, is what we've determined. There's no specific projects over and above normal maintenance that were articulated to us. So just, for budgeting purposes, we have recommended as a subcommittee to reduce this to $7,000, which is more than the average, but a little bit more tightly budgeted than in recent years. So that's the thinking there. And we'll get to votes on these, but a similar calculation was made on 55105 equipment maintenance. Again, historically, it's in the $5,000 to $6,000 range. I know it's not much, but we had recommended that we reduce that to $5,000 in many years. Again, a lot of the facilities that we have right now are newer, particularly the groundwater plant, and any replacements and maintenance we do at the surface water plant generally involve new equipment because of the age of that facility. So equipment maintenance, actually, we've had a pretty good handle on for the last several years. Tom?
A quick question for Corey. Can you give me on 55105, can you give me an expended?
Yeah, $1,600 to date.
Okay, so it's really not much more than we had already. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you want a motion?
Well, yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we might as well do them as we go to. So yeah, I'll entertain a motion for building maintenance for $7,000 revised budget.
So moved by me.
Second.
Seconded.
Any further? Thank you. Any further discussion, Andrew?
Just a quick question. So you said historically it'd been around 6,000, but last year it was 10,000. Is that right?
Last year was 5882.
It's actual, but the budget was 10,000.
The budget was 10,000.
So
Right.
we bumped it up last year, and now we haven't spent it, so we're bumping it back down. Is that the?
No, it was 10,000. The budget was 10,000 last year. We kept it at 10,000 for this year.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, if you look, in the historicals,
it's less.
It's been 10,000 for a number of years.
Okay, so it's just been level funded for a long time.
Yeah, I mean,
but
and
we're
we've
just not
sort of
actually
kept
spending
it
that much.
at 10,000 because there's, again, with aging facilities, that it seemed like it was a possibility, but
We never got that.
in the last 5 or 6 years, that hasn't seemed to shake out. So we just thought, again, in the water budget's gone up like 10% every year for the last 3 years, so we're just hoping to get a little bit more of a handle on that budget, if we could.
And we appreciate that.
So all those in favor of a budget of $7,000 for building maintenance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And then I will entertain a motion for 55105 equipment maintenance for a budget of $5,000.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, so on road repairs,
Oh, yeah.
the budget on this, again, used to be around $10,000. The department had some ideas for some projects last year and had requested a $15,000 bump for this year's budget, which we approved, or we supported, and the town approved for a budget of $25,000. We have, again, there are projects out there, but with short staff and the lack of contractors, it's been difficult. We have had some hydrant work and some emergency repairs for water main breaks, but sometimes this is paid for, the repair is paid for under the town paving budget. The bottom line is we thought that this was one of those things that, it probably should be a little bit less, but we didn't have enough information really to bring the hammer down on this one, I guess is what it comes down to. We'd certainly be willing to listen to alternative discussions, but we just thought that road repairs and dealing with water distribution is such a variable that for at least one more year, we'd like to see how the department reacts to that budget. Tom?
Could I have an expended on that? 55252?
4,400.
Yeah. I think it really speaks here.
Did you have something to say, Steve?
I just wanted to make you aware that I will be utilizing quite a bit of that remaining funds. We have had one project, we had one water main break on Epping Road that I haven't received the invoice for yet. And I've got 3 hydrants that need to be repaired that that the contractor hasn't had time to, but I think he's going to either this week or possibly the week after Thanksgiving, that are off the side of the road, so.
Excellent. That's why we're not touching it.
Yep, I appreciate it, thank you.
Your intuition.
So that is the same vehicle maintenance. Again, we has historically been a little less than the 10,000, but again, with an aging vehicular fleet, we thought it'd be worth keeping that as is, because it just takes one drivetrain or brake job to blow up that budget. And there are quite a number of vehicles associated with this department.
Andrew wants to make a
Andrew.
I'm just sorry, before we get off the road maintenance, so it sounds like a lot of it has to do with hydrants. Why isn't that covered in the fire department budget rather than this, like?
Ooh, that gets into the hydrant thing again.
As if this is.
The fire department has pretty much absolved themselves of all responsibility relating to hydrants for a variety of reasons.
But let me know, it's all of these
When
water.
when a hydrant feed has to be repaired, it's not the fire department that repairs it, it's the water department. So even though the hydrant, the physical structure is used by the fire department, everything basically from the valve down is sort of water department responsibility. And in fact, there are new line items from last year that supports that. That's the way, I guess, maybe, I don't know if Russ wants to address that, but basically that change was made last year, whereas the responsibility went from the fire department to the water department.
Yeah, just thinking non-sewer.
If I may.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's an excellent point, Andrew, because, 3 meetings ago or so, our very first meeting, we had that discussion about shifting some of the burden of the fire suppression to the general fund, right?
Right.
So your point is a good one, and I think maybe in the long run, there's an item there that
Well, again, I think
that has some burden on the general fund rather than on the water fund. But
Same logic as the.
Pardon me?
The hydrant.
It is somewhat of the
fire
same logic.
department. It's the same logic.
I think also what's happening is that
It's not really
Right,
their
but
responsibility.
you recall the conversation we had, like 3 meetings ago about, there's now a line, I can't articulate it well, but there's now a line in the general government fund that offsets the burden for the water ratepayers, right?
I'll apologize, I wasn't at the fire and police subcommittee meeting that week, was the week I was out of town.
That's right.
So
I
there's
missed that.
should we talk about this? So the fire department had a budget line item, 20,000 or 25,000 a year or something like that, for
20,
hydrant maintenance, but it really had nothing to do with hydrant maintenance. It was more about support of the water pipes in buildings for being able to suppress fire and sprinklers and all that stuff.
Change the name.
But changed the name, but also it has nothing to really do with the fire department. So then they've had that budget, that line item in there forever. And so that we made a decision to move it to the general fund because it's not really
Fire department.
department. And this is kind of the same thing.
Yeah. But over and above that, there was the fact that there was, I'm not sure if it was the same expense, but there was another expense that was being carried by the water ratepayers that it's felt to really be a general government,
that was part of it too, yeah.
a general government function. So we unburdened a little bit of that from the water fund. So your question was spot on.
Yeah, the logic there was that if you had a well,
With a hydrant right in front of your house.
it was great. Yeah.
Good for
so,
you.
Yeah, all the ratepayers are covering fire suppression there. Yeah. So,
This is a little bit different because even though it's a fire hydrant, it's basically an offshoot of the water supply system.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, we don't want the fire department to be responsible, I think quite rightly, with hiring contractors to maintain this when we have a very qualified water department that can do exactly that. So whether there's an offset or not, we can talk about that at some other time.
Future meetings, something to think about. I just.
It's a great question, Ann.
So I'm just confused on anything that's on these pages is going to directly affect only the water
Correct.
ratepayers.
Correct.
Not the rest of the town.
So the
So
general fund,
things
the
that-
general fund is everything we've talked about prior to tonight.
Right.
And the water and the sewer funds are separate funds
Right.
on paper.
So anything in here, just like we were talking about with there was something else we were talking about where it should be carried by the town in general.
That was under when we talked about police and fire, it was the fire suppression, what we have historically called the hydrant maintenance fee. And what it really is the delta cost of putting larger pipes and larger pumps and more staff associated with providing fire protection for the town. And even if you're not on town water, you still get fire protection. Pumper trucks fill up at a hydrant and then go out and fight the fire at your house in Northwest or West Exeter.
Right.
So the feeling was that a portion of that fire suppression should be picked up by the general fund.
Yeah.
All taxpayers, not just the water users. So that's what we did.
So doesn't this feel the same as that?
Yes.
It does to me.
I mean, I guess you could make, again, from my feeling, it's more of a maintenance thing, yes, and we could try to figure out and maybe use the same percentages.
Future project.
It's
probably
Again,
not
and
on
the other one was more for things that have already happened, i.e. putting pipes in the ground, and that might be 12 inches instead of 8 inches because they had to provide fire
Right.
flows. This is actually an ongoing day-to-day, week-to-week maintenance situation on these hydrants, which, again, flushing hydrants has nothing to do with fire.
No, but it
It's
has to
cleaning
do
the
with the
water
town.
from the water lines. The hydrants just happen to be the conduit for getting rid of that water.
Yeah.
So the maintenance of them is really, realistically, the water department's
I
responsibility.
understand that. I'm not saying it should be part of fire. I think it should be part of general government.
So we can put a marker on that and look at that a little bit closer, but Bob put it in the proper context, I think, which is the hydrants are part of the water system as well. They're not just for fire protection because we do flush them and we do maintain them via the water department. So we'd have to do a little bit more of a deep dive into this.
When we had sort of talked about that the AWWA, by their calculations, think that we should be spending $750,000 for fire suppression allocation to the general fund. Obviously, our budget this year just went up to 100, so we're, according to the experts, we're woefully short, but Russ and I have talked about doing a deeper dive into this to figure out what is exactly the number. Is it 15%? Is it 5%? I mean, we're going off curve data that is based on thousands of water systems around the country. We want to take a look at just ours and figure out what that allocation is. So this is a very reasonable aspect of that study. We can add that in. Good question.
One more thing. When you do flush the hydrants, can you do it in the summertime and let me know so I can have my kids running around?
Do a little Brooklyn Queens action.
Let's do that.
Very
Or have to take them to the water park.
Very
then.
well-oiled machine, the system flushing program.
Yes, they have. Dan, did you have something you wanted to add?
I made my point.
Okay. Ziggs, did you have something?
No, I'm good.
Zig.
Okay, so, but that's an excellent point that we will take under advisement probably in the next year. Next item is system maintenance. 55296. There was a pretty decent-sized jump last year in the budget based on some potential maintenance items that were planned. I guess, and I don't think, last number I had, I can't remember if this is one of the things that you had given me, Corey, but do you have the year-to-date on that?
With encumbrances, it's 47,005.
Oh.
So what the subcommittee talked about is, so at 47.5 with encumbrances, which means that most of the work is already anticipated to be done into next year. The subcommittee talked about revising this budget to $60,000, which again is somewhat more in line with historical expenditures. In fact, the expenditures haven't come close to 60 in the last 6 years. So we had, is that still, recalling what our conversations were?
Yeah, certainly mine.
So again, there's a lot of work to be done here, but again, with us being down 3 people, a contractor is hard to come by, supply chain issues, it just doesn't seem feasible that a lot of this work is going to get done. And our feeling is that if we budget it a little bit more in line with expenditures, and then there's specific needs going forward, then we can address that and increase the budget accordingly, which we've done throughout this budget. So if there's a need, I think the committee's shown an interest in providing the department what they need.
Bob, may I?
Sure, Corey.
Just to clarify, so there's 3,000 encumbered, so the lion's share has already been spent for the year. So my question to Steve Dalton is, do you have anything in the pipeline in the next 45 days, Steve, that would even bring it closer to that 84, or is 60,000 more in line?
I think the 60,000 probably be adequate for next year. I don't see how we make out with that, and possibly have to bring it back up the following year when we get hopefully more staff.
Yeah.
Because you look at some of the line items, the hydrant maintenance and the valve turning, those are all very specific labor-intensive items, and if we're down people, the short answer is that they're just not going to get done. And so, again, if we do get the staff, I think we have no problem providing appropriate funds to do that work, but, well, not to belabor it. So I would make a motion for that line to be budgeted at $60,000 instead of 84.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Just as a note on the tank maintenance, we had contracted with a company, talked about it the last couple of years. It's in the 4th year of, I think it's a 5-year contract, is it? Or
5 years.
5 years.
Yes.
But it was sort of front-loaded for the first 3. And as you can see, this budget is down $13,000 this year, and it should go down. I think my understanding from Steve is that it should be right around that $64,000 for next year. Again, it's a declining balance contract.
So just context on this, if we bonded for water tank painting and maintenance on a single pipe basis, a standpipe basis, we would be looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars. So years ago, we went into a fixed price contract, which basically is front loaded, like Bob said, and then tapers off in the later years. But it's more cost effective to do that than to try to bond and pay interest on large scale capital projects for water tank painting and maintenance.
Russ, you just answered my question, and I assume Paul would agree with it. Every time I go by that tower, or any time I go by a tower that's all rusting, I'm so happy that we have this program. Are you comfortable with it, Paul?
Yes.
Good.
And then the last item down, well, not the last item, but GIS software 55136, a lot of this is related to targeting the lead pipe locations and, a module associated with that.
And that's a requirement from the EPA.
From EPA, exactly.
Inventory them.
So we're still in the process of sort of figuring out what exactly, again, without a GIS person in town or let's say an expert, we're in the process of trying to sort all of this out. We don't think it'll be the 30,000, so it's been reduced somewhat. We've spent 25 already this year, and we'll sort of have to see how this shakes out over the next year. Obviously, we'll have to have some answers and tweak our software next year because the report's due in October. But hopefully, but we'll take a look at this line again for FY25. Metering and backflow, the note talks about $140,000, but in actuality, it is $163,000. We did bump this up a couple of years ago, just as some history in, what was it, around 12 or 13, Russ, when we did that meter bond?
2015.
15?
Yeah.
We had put together a $750,000 bond to replace about half of the meters in town, and then the plan was over the next 10 years, replace the other half, and we had fallen somewhat short of that, for a number of reasons. We do have a person in town who is very good at the whole meter program and has been keeping on top of it. So the thought by the committee was, even though this is a fairly decent amount of money, that we would keep that funding in place. It is generally spent or close to spent most every year. And this is the town's cash register, as it were. This is how we figure out what to bill people. So if the meters are starting to slow down, they very rarely speed up. They usually slow down, which is not a good way to go if that's how you're making your revenue. So we want to keep this as current as possible. And then the last item that we had as a subcommittee was the electricity. I know this is something we sort of talk about every year. The town has negotiated over the past few years some very favorable rates. And water, again, with an aging facility, is sort of hard to determine exactly what electrical rate or electrical costs might be. One thing that's sort of happened is with the rising rates as well as the drought last year is that people are using less water. And so it appears the phenomenon has manifested itself into significantly less electricity usage. So Russ and I had talked about a revised number of, I think 74.5 was what we talked about, Russ?
Yes, we did.
As a more reasonable rate based on what we're projected to spend. Again, we sort of take a look at this every year, depending on the rate contract that we have, as well as water usage, but that seemed to be and I guess for rounding off purposes, we'll make that $75,000 just for a round number. But my notes say that Russ had said 74.5. So I will make a motion to revise the budget for 55092 to $75,000.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. So general expenses total, Corey?
537,739, 537739.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thanks, Chris. Further discussion?
Bob, I just had one more question.
Sure, Andrew.
On the tank maintenance, I think the budget that I'm looking at says 102,089, but then you just said that it was more like 65,000. I think I missed.
Well, there's multiple tanks. So that's just on the Hampton Road, or I'm sorry, the Epping Road.
So the 102
tower.
is the right
Yeah, the
number.
newer, yeah, it is. So the newer tank, actually, it's already gone down to the 64. It's been much higher. It was up in the 200s a couple of years ago. But we do have the Hampton Road tank as part of that maintenance program as well.
Okay, yeah, I just saw that the line
Yep.
in the notes, it said 64, so I just wanted to make sure we were right there.
So, all those in favor of a budget for general expenses, $537,739, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And a new water distribution total, Corey.
967,301, 967,301.
So moved.
I will second that. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. On to treatment. Next page. So on full-time salary and wages 51110, right now we have 4 operators in the water system. When we built the groundwater plant in 2015, the thought was that because it was new technology, that it could effectively run almost on its own with somebody just sort of overseeing it. And over the last several years, we've just found that that's not really feasible. With everything else going on and being down people in the department in general, that the department felt that they needed somebody that was full-time, at least available to manage the groundwater plant, which...
It's kind of like self-checkout. You really can't self-checkout. You got to have somebody standing there. So
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then just, since this has become such a critical part of our water distribution in town, that our water supply, that the subcommittee felt that this was a very reasonable request. I'm not sure how successful we're going to be in getting somebody, but hopefully we will. We have very qualified folks on the water side of things, including some folks with a lot of experience. So we're hoping that that this can come forward. Having said that, well, let's do the insurance first, and then we'll get to the next item. So Corey, health insurance for treatment?
Water treatment health insurance, 113,671, 113,671. Dental insurance, 7,171, 7171. Life insurance, $207. Workers' compensation, $10,132, 10132.
And total benefits?
203,864, 203,864.
Thank you. Okay. So if you go down to consulting, about halfway down the page, you see a $50,000 request for FY24. There's we're in the process of sort of sorting through some succession plans with the treatment plant operators. And there was a question that if things went a certain way, there might be a let's say a void of historical or institutional knowledge in operating, in some cases, a 50 or 60-year-old water system. And so that's what this request refers to, is being able to have someone available on a, let's say, an on-call basis if the succession plans go a certain way. The subcommittee looked at this and thought that with the request for a fifth operator up top that we just talked about, that given the labor issues over the last couple of months, or last couple of years, we felt that it was probably a long shot that we were going to be able to hire somebody and that we were going to have a consulting situation going forward. The chances are is that one or the other of them would happen, and in which case we would have, effectively money in one line or the other. So the thinking was that instead of not supporting the full-time hire, which we think is important, that we would not recommend the consulting add-on, and that if by some miracle we're able to hire someone as well as the succession plan goes in a different direction, then there are water reserves or other funding mechanisms available in which to have this consulting person available to us. So that was the subcommittee's thinking.
So are we voting on a miracle, or are we voting?
We would recommend not voting on a miracle and sort of looking at the recent history and assuming that that is going to happen. And if it doesn't, like I said, if a miracle happens, then we'll adjust at halftime.
So to be specific, I think the subcommittee is recommending to cut line 55055, just in case.
Well, cut the add-on. It'd still be $5,000 as a somewhat
Correct,
of
but
a,
I just want to be very explicit.
So as of right now, prior to discussion, that would be the subcommittee's recommendation. So for discussion, I will move the preliminary budget for 55055 consulting to be changed from $55,000 to $5,000.
And I would second that.
So is that somewhat clear?
Yep.
It's sort of an if come and a maybe. And again, if things happen in a certain way, we may have to spend both. But the thinking is that there's going to be money available somewhere for most of the year, if not all of the year, and we'd like to go with that.
Just to comment on this too, for context, we have a situation right now where we have a very senior person in a position that could end up in a retirement or not. We're not sure, and right. The indications are that if that plan were to go forward, that this individual could be made available through some sort of a consulting basis. I am advocating for this. I think it should stay in. It is. We can't say for sure what's going to happen, but Bob has said if we need to tap reserves, we can tap reserves, and I suppose that's a funding source for this. But I just wanted to put a little bit of context on that for the committee so you understood what could be in the offing here.
So to follow up on that, if we're successful in filling the fifth position, obviously it's going to be a newbie who doesn't have the institutional knowledge that this person, should he retire, walks out the door with.
I would agree with that, yes.
So, okay. Huh.
That's the risk.
That's the risk, yeah.
And again, what we're thinking is that with the retirement/succession scenario not fully being played out yet, and no indications of what it might be, and it's already November, the subcommittee felt that we were on, if not firm ground, at least stable ground, that the chances of both of these occurring concurrently are probably less than 50%. Yeah. And if that's the case, we thought that this would be and we fully understand Russ's position and the department's position and respect it. It just seemed like it was a lot of money on consulting to sort of hang out there.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
but unless I'm mistaken, just stating the obvious, which I'm so good at doing, we're budgeting for an additional position that
Yes.
hasn't been filled yet. So the budget will have money in it, right? So if that fifth position is, or that new position is not filled, there is flux, there is wiggle room in the budget. Am I correct?
That would be correct, yes.
Thank you.
But to also follow up on that, you could really write in both budgets, because the likelihood of both of those happening, the money wouldn't get spent anyway, because if you put both in there and neither happen, or only one of them happens, you don't
That's
spend the
what
money
we're
anyway. Yeah.
And again, it is a risk and everything, but 50,000 seems like a lot of money. I mean, I would certainly entertain a different number.
That's going to be my question.
You could do any number. It just seemed like that was a lot of money to hang
Yeah,
out
I
there. We
agree
didn't
with
really address a different number because our thinking was sort of, we've got, I don't even remember if we've talked about, it's in the back under tab 8. It would be the second item. So for FY24, it's roughly a $46,500 impact for a part-time person, or a partial year person for next year.
New full-time person.
So there's a roughly $50,000 available one way or the other. And again, our thinking was the chances of both of them happening are less than 50%, so that's what we wanted to go with. Again, given the water fund's rapid rise in the last few years, we thought this was something that needed really to be looked at.
Yeah.
Andrew. Chris.
Oh, thanks. So, I really appreciate you guys trying to shave where you can shave, but I definitely want to take note that the department and Russ both think it should be left in. And Russ, I know, is really good at trying to find money that we can cut from a budget. So if he's saying, I don't recommend cutting it, I think that's something we really need to think about as well, too.
Sure. You know what else is really good at? Is finding funding sources within the budget.
Yes, so many talents.
Having worked with him for 18 years, I have full faith in those abilities.
I think I'm supportive of having a different number in there, leaving it, but not at 5,000, but maybe something higher with a little extra buffer.
Sure. Amanda?
I have like 3 questions, so. Somebody asked, where did that number come from, the 50,000? I think we should circle back to that. Just for clarity's sake, if this person retires, how fast would their position get filled? And so where would that salary money go? And then third question was, how long after this person retires does it take the new person to get the institutional knowledge from the consultant? And then if it takes 6 months.
Well, the consultant would probably be the retired person.
Right, but I understand. That's my problem, though. Is do we pay that person $50,000 for 3 years to keep backfilling the institutional knowledge, or is there a better
See, the new person probably would not be a senior person. I don't, and again, I don't know if the department's even, but I think it would be
closer person.
It would ratchet up so that whoever's second in line or in command right now, that's usually the way we do things.
So aren't they already working on getting that institutional knowledge now?
Yes.
And
exactly.
How long will that take them to get that we need to budget a whole year of consulting? Or is that a whole year? So back to the first question.
I think the 50 is anticipated as and I don't know what the calculation was, but it's a $1 per hour rate times an estimate. It's probably, for round numbers, I don't know if Russ has, but it's probably 50, let's say it's $100 an hour at 500 hours, just as a rough number. It's probably something like that. They wouldn't need to be full-time, 2,000 hours on call, but they might need to be available a few hours a day or a day or so a week, if something particular came up. But again, there are 3 other people who are working with that person right now that are gaining knowledge in how to work things on a, literally an hourly basis. So that's sort of where the subcommittee was coming from.
And
Chris?
Go ahead.
Well, I don't know, Amanda still had that.
Yeah, I would just, the question got raised about where the number come from, and it's 6 months of wages, if you will, wage equivalents.
There you go. But you had one more question, Amanda, you said?
Well, yeah, I said 3 questions. So $50,000 came from 6 months of wage equivalents, so that would be for one year you anticipate that, Russ? Or would you anticipate coming back for that consulting again in 2025's budget?
So I think the answer to that question is that we'd have to evaluate what happens with the consulting arrangement and how that is working and what the specifics are of it. And then we would make a determination and come back and recommend something for 2025 after we see how it's working.
So for example, if a person got hired right at the 6 months when we might start, then we'd have a full 6 months of consulting and educating that person. But if they come in November, then it may take more than just 30 days. So we might be back in 2025 for a little bit more consulting, right, CC?
And by the same token, if we don't hire, or if the person doesn't retire until the end of next year, then the people who are working with them now have another, effectively a year of gaining institutional knowledge. So potentially the need for a consultant becomes less with every month that goes by. Presumably people are learning on the job and all that. But again, the staff down at the surface water plant is crackerjack, and they know what this person just happens to have been there for a long, long time, and he's great. But his other staff are very good as well, if not great.
And so that third question that just went unanswered is, if this person retires, he or she is one of these current...
Full-time.
Correct.
Most expensive.
So that money, when they retire,
it's already budgeted.
That money would come off of that role.
Exactly.
Right, so wouldn't that also be a second source of payment for the consulting?
That was our reasoning.
Your question. That's double reasoning, because if the person doesn't get hired and if the person retires, there's money.
There you go.
Okay.
So I don't know who might be next, so you guys can...
Yeah, I was going to simply support, because some of this is somewhat academic, because it has a lot to do with just what might happen. There's,
Go on for all night.
But the truth is that the department has requested another body, so it makes sense to have that funding in there. And then I also support Tim's point that, like, yes, the consultant may very well be an important thing. We should leave something in there, just to maybe a reduced number, because what we won't let happen is we won't let it, if we need it, we won't let it fall through the cracks. We won't let it not happen, right? But let's put something in there, maybe not 50,000, a smaller number, just to make sure it's secured and it'll be in the notes. And then if the scenario presents itself that we need to secure him as a consultant, we've got some of that funding there. We have his full-time salary going away, and we'll find the other nickels we need to make it happen.
Right, because that'll bridge the gap if that doesn't happen. There's not as much that needs to be made up.
I just want to make sure that, have you asked everything you want to ask? I don't, because I don't want to have too many people. You all set? Andrew.
Excellent points.
Just one question. I'm on board with the subcommittee's recommendation of 5,000, but just looking at historically speaking, the average since 2017 has been around 25,000 of actual expenditures. So what would typically consulting this line be used for?
We had the TTHM issue, the chlorinated, the trihalomethanes a few years ago.
That's done.
That was that project is done, but for years, we had, effectively consultants on call because we were continually, you've all gotten the notices in the mail, and we had, we had some issues.
Okay.
And that's what a lot of that money went to in the past.
So we're not anticipating that next year?
It doesn't seem like, it seems like we've moved beyond that, yes.
Okay, then, I support the subcommittee's recommendation.
And another, and I don't know, I guess Corey could answer this. And one thing I just thought of, if there was a consensus to put a little bit of money available for this person, the capital outlay line for capital down at the bottom of page 5 has been fairly high in the last few years. Again, aging surface water plant. We've replaced a lot of, in fact, we're in the middle of a 2-year, almost $1 million contract to upgrade the facilities on Portsmouth Avenue. So there's a lot of work that it goes into keeping this surface water plant alive, and we as a committee have supported that. And so if we put some money in this consulting, and then let's say it gets to be November of next year, and it doesn't appear like we're going to need it, can we put that money from consulting into capital outlay for other projects? Is that doable?
It's possible, sure. We could do that via budget transfer.
Okay. I mean, that would be an idea, or at least something to think about. Again, according to Steve and to Paul, I mean, the capital outlay line, is over $500,000, and Steve says it could be easily $800,000 with work that needs to be done and equipment that needs to be replaced. So, and most of that is obviously one contract, but yeah, I mean, I guess the subcommittee would be willing to. But it'd have to come from the committee, because I think we've sort of worried this to death and feel like there's multiple funding sources for this should the worst case scenario for the town occur.
Right.
That being that we hire somebody on March 15th and that and that the person retires right away.
Yeah.
That would be the worst case scenario, and I think the chances of that are pretty slim.
Yeah.
But again, more than happy to entertain alternative views. If we want to put in a different number, fire away.
Did we make a motion?
There's a motion and a second on the table right now.
To make it
We're
5,000.
discussing it, to
I
make
think
it
I suggest making
5,000.
it 3 months of salary or payments for.
We should vote on the motion before we do that.
No, we would just, I'll rescind my motion.
Oh, okay.
If there's a
Let's see if you want to do it
consensus.
that. Oh, I see.
Is there a consensus on that or no?
I'm still,
Well, we're in the discussion.
we're in the discussion
I don't
of the
wanna
motion
go-
and the second.
I don't want to go voting something down if there's not a
I get
consensus
it.
to do anything.
Yeah, no, I'm just backing up to where we are in the process.
So what is
I'm-
Tim, are you saying 25 then?
The motion right now on the table, if I may,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, is that we reduce 55 to 5.
Yeah.
25,
And that's where we're discussing right now. And I'm pretty firm on that one, I got to tell you, Bob. For the reasons already,
You're gonna arm wrestle someone over
I'll
it?
take your lead if you end up moving yours, removing yours. But I'm pretty firm on the 5, and we've explained where the source, where the funding would come from, right? It would come from the person who actually then is no longer employed, and it would likely come from the position that hasn't yet been filled. So, and we're talking about hypotheticals here. So that's my argument for sticking with the 5.
I think Amanda makes a good point. She had asked where the 50,000 came from, and Russ said that was basically a 6-month wage, allocation from this person.
Yeah.
So if that person retires, then all of a sudden there's a pretty significant amount of full-time wages that is not being spent.
That's the point.
For the rest of the year,
Yeah.
which could then be transferred into as a consulting contract.
Yeah.
Until
Wait.
the person's replaced.
Right.
Yeah.
Until the person's replaced.
Exactly. But
okay.
I don't see us replacing 2 people next year. I mean, I just,
All right, now I'm
we haven't had
going
that kind of luck.
to raise my hand and just comment. So, because we also, I do believe, hopefully, in a professional position, if someone's going to retire, they make an announcement in advance. It's discussed in advance, so you have some warning so that you might start the search process for that new person. It's not like they're going to say, I'm retiring next week, and then they're gone. That there's going to be some lead time, in which I would hope would mean there's also be some search time, so it won't be.
Our understanding is that this is a
Months and months.
contemplation, and it's not a firm directive at this point. I mean, the town,
But once it is, I would think there'd be some lead
I
time.
think he basically
Yeah.
articulated that we don't know exactly what's going to happen, and I would agree with you. This guy is very professional.
Yeah.
He's not going to leave us hanging,
Right.
and so we're going to have plenty of time to figure all of this
Yeah.
out.
I just want to
Start
ask
the
the
search.
question of Russ, though, just to explore a little bit more of your discomfort with that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, all that's being discussed here is a hedge.
Yeah.
Essentially,
Mm-hmm.
you're
Absolutely.
making determinations in the future for a situation that hasn't occurred yet.
Right.
Yep.
So I was just going to say that the retirement notice for anybody is not necessarily months. It
Yeah.
can be weeks.
Right.
Yeah,
So that's something to know.
absolutely.
And we got pretty long notice for Jen Perry, and we still have an interim director.
Correct.
So, I mean, even if they give us a year's notice, we might not fill that position for a year and a half.
It's all speculation, and we're trying to budget on speculation. on
So
I'm with
I guess I'll, Tim and Chris, I'll let you sort of mull things over since you had sort of raised, again, I have no problem discussing a different number.
I was just proposing a middle ground, but I think ultimately I'd be supportive of the subcommittee's recommendation. You guys did all the work on this.
So you were thinking more in the like a $25,000?
That's what I was thinking, cut it in half, 3 months of wages, so there's some buffer if this goes wrong, and if it doesn't, then it's, can be used for something else.
Again, sometimes water and sewer can be a little intimidating because of the technical nature of it. I unfortunately have been involved in this for
too long.
Hate to say decades, but sorry.
And master minutia.
And so, but this is no different than a new EMT, a fire support staff, or an part-time welfare person. It's a critical staff in town. So we should look at it that way, the technical aspects of it aside. So again, if there's a feeling by people on the committee to go in a different direction, look at this as a staff person, not necessarily this deep and mysterious technical thing. It's a staff person that's critical to the operation of the utility, and we're just trying to figure out the best way forward.
I don't know if Steve wants to say anything.
Steve, do you have any input on this?
We've probably lulled them into a coma with all our discussion.
No.
Yeah, wake up, Steve. Sorry.
Yep, I've been here.
I'm sorry.
No, I am worried. I mean, Paul is a very technical, the current person is a very technical person. They all have different roles at the water treatment plant right now. Not everybody is doing the same thing. The current person in that role does a lot of the administrative stuff, which, and keeping the town in compliance with New Hampshire DES. That's his primary purpose. There are other people that actually run, well, he has obviously a big part of running the plant. Other people have a good grasp on actually running and physically making the water. This other person, his technical abilities to make process changes and all that are still there. But other people make process changes as well. That's not so much my concern as much as having somebody there to do the administrative items as far as reporting, making sure the appropriate tests get done on time, and all of that with, certain like the PFAS testing, the lead and copper rule, all the other things that person is responsible for. To have him just walk away would tax the remaining operators to a point where they just wouldn't be able to run the plant and do the administrative stuff. And that's my concern.
Duly noted. So, appreciate the conversation. Chris brought up a good point. Russ's job is to sort of manage, 130 some odd, 150 staff in town and keep the well-oiled machine moving forward. And I think, if he's got some reservations and concerns, I think there's a lot of money available, but I think with this being an expense item and with the caveat that maybe toward the end of next year, if the worst case doesn't happen, and that money could potentially be used for other things, which are vital, I think I would be of interest. I would rescind my motion on the 50 with the interest of the $25,000, like a 3-month, give us something to be able to do if we need to. Again, understanding that I think there's still a decent pot of money at the full-time wages, but that is somewhat of a compromise, I think, that maybe doesn't make everyone happy, but maybe that's the definition of compromise. But I think it goes down the road towards it. Our positions are somewhat met, but I also, out of respect to the town manager who's thought about this a lot more, like to do something. So I would rescind that motion.
And I would just add to that by saying, based upon if we had, this would give us more options, so I appreciate at least the 25, because it gives us the ability to move faster, whereas in a situation we could find ourselves in, we might not be able to move fast, and if we can't do that, then
A solid
we
point.
find ourselves in trouble.
So would you be willing to rescind your second?
I am willing to do that.
So I will entertain a motion to revise the budget on 55055 consulting to something, whatever, if someone wants to make a motion for
So I'll make
a different number.
I'll make the motion then, unless I'm mistaken, to make it the sum of 25,000 plus 5,000, so 30,000 for that line item. So line 55055 now for 30,000.
I'd second that.
Any further discussion?
I thought it was really good discussion.
It was actually. Thank you all for your voice. All those in favor of a budget for consulting 55055 of $30,000 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Some comments on lab supplies and chemicals, obviously with a lot of the regulations, some of them articulated on the first page of the subcommittee's narrative, a lot of chemicals and things that we're testing for in our water that effectively didn't exist 30 years ago. Even if they did exist, we either didn't have the technology to test for them or we didn't know about them.
They were just delicious then.
Yes, or they were just that good tasting, one of those. But again, it's just sort of the cost of doing business. We do take a lot of our water off the river. We've tried to supplement that with groundwater sources, but we still take a lot of water off the river and the associated issues associated with that. So
Would it help if I didn't bathe in the river anymore?
That would be fine. That gets you that nice glow.
TMI.
So one final item here, again, electricity, 55092. Russ and I talked and thought that somewhere around 80,000 would be more accurate. Again, this was bumped up a few years ago when electric rates had gone up, but between conservation and the drought last year, we seemed to have come to a different plateau as far as consumption goes. So I would move the electricity budget to be $80,000.
And I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so general expenses subtotal, Corey.
481,600. 481,600.
I'll move that amount.
I'll second, sorry, go ahead.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And a total water treatment total, Corey.
1,028,630. 1,028,630.
I will move that number.
I'll second that number.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Debt service, pretty self-explanatory. The good news is that 3 issues are coming off. One, the Portsmouth Avenue water line is coming off this year, and then 2 additional debt items will be retired next year, which is nice. Mentioned capital outlay before, so we'll approve, let's see, the debt service number. I will entertain a motion for a debt service total of $1,640,513.
I'll move that.
Seconded.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. So capital outlay equipment, there is a a slight change. That's described on page 62 of the CIP book. It's a new air compressor that would be split with the sewer department, and it was decided to put this as a capital outlay purchase in the budget instead of a warrant article. So you'll see $22,500 in this budget and the same amount in the sewer budget.
But to be clear, it's coming off, so the reference to the CIP, page 62, is just description.
Exactly.
Okay.
It will not be a warrant article. $45,000 would merit it being a warrant article, but if you split it in the two funds, then, and again, it's a piece of equipment. If you read the CIP description, we're operating with fairly. Actually, Steve, if you're still there, you have a pretty good sense of, we have a couple of air compressors that are 30 years old, I think, and need to be, if you could go through an explanation on these, just really quickly.
The water and sewer department have one air compressor that is roughly 30 years old. We use it for a few different things. It is also a backup to the built-in air compressors at the wastewater treatment plant. If we have a fault with those compressors, we're able to utilize this other compressor as a backup to those.
Cool.
So the bottom line is, if the backup, which is 30 years old, doesn't function correctly, and then we have a fixed item at the facility that goes bad, we're in deep sneakers. So this is a reasonable.
That is correct.
A reasonable purchase.
Bob?
Yes.
I have one question though. I mean, I think the threshold for CIP is 25,000, not 45, right?
Well, it's 25,000, right, but 45 would be over the 25. So if you were buying it just as a piece of equipment for the departments.
So why are we not making this a warrant article?
So the CIP item threshold for something to be in the capital improvement plan is 25,000.
Right.
But it doesn't, there's a common misconception that means it's got to be a warrant article.
Yeah, that's true too.
And that's
That's true.
actually not true. This is, the reason the CIP items like this are budgeted in the water sewer funds is because they are self-supporting. And so as a funding source, they would pay for this.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we weren't trying to end around the system, so that's the
Right.
so
No,
thank
there's
you.
no end around.
Doesn't mean we can't do that. It's for the greater good.
Speaking of the greater good, water system capital, 57015, a fairly large number, most of which is year 2 of a contract for a new filter and clarifier upgrade at the surface water plant. Project that was sorely needed, and it was an outgrowth of some of the TTHM issues from a few years ago. Again, we are in year 2 of that contract, so next year this number should go down significantly. We are also in the process of allocating monies towards other critical aspects of our water supply infrastructure, notably Stadium Well and the river pump station. The river pump station pumps water out of the river over to the surface water plant, and Stadium Well is one of the 3 wells that supply the groundwater plant. So these are very critical components, and we thought that despite the number, were projects that needed to happen. And as you can see from the 2023 budget and what has actually been expended, the department is very good about when they say there are projects to be done, they complete them, and equipment to be replaced. So I will entertain a motion for the capital outlay budget of $590,250.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. So we had appropriation from reserves last year. So a new water fund total, Corey.
$4,973,916. 4973916.
I will move that number for a water fund total.
Second.
Okay, good.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay. How about we take a 4.5-minute break till 8 o'clock, get some water, stretch our legs. Candy break.
Candy break.
Yeah.
Sponsored
do.
by
Sponsored by
Core Dental.
Christine
Yeah.
Suter.
The Sugar Queen.
2 CIP items to discuss on Thursday. And we started speaking about the School Street improvements during the DPW general discussion. As with most utility projects in town, there are 3 phases to it. One is water, one is sewer, and one is the general fund, which would be drainage, and then the subsequent paving and all of that. As noted in all of the write-ups, this will be the third $6 million utility job in the last 4 years that we've had after Salem Street and West Side Drive. We were, the subcommittee was somewhat up in the air on this, except for two items that sort of came to light toward the end, one of which I think we discussed a few weeks ago, is the DES has awarded us a 35% forgiveness on the principal of the sewer portion of this project, which amounts to approximately $750,000. So the feeling is, the downside is we would have to vote on design and construction in order to obtain this this forgiveness, which we usually don't do. We usually do design and then we do the construction the next year. So there's some risk here where we'll be actually paying for the bond, during the design phase. But the feeling is that in addition to the $750,000, if we wait a year or two, this project's going to be easily another $750,000 to $1 million more 2 or 3 years from now, which means we'll be down $1.5 million. So the project needs to be done. And what sort of cemented that for the subcommittee is Steve Dalton quite nicely alerted us to the fact that literally after every rainstorm in town, and there have been a lot of them this year, is they have to send our $500,000 Vector truck out to School Street to flush out the line. It's so flat and so small that people there have backups every time it rains. So that's not exactly the way we want to be treating our ratepayers. So for that reason, the subcommittee will be supporting this. We can go into a little more detail Thursday, but we will be supporting that. And the second item is a new surface water plant. We've talked about the groundwater plant, but the surface water plant is parts of it almost 100 years old, but most of it's in excess of 50 years old. The original request was for a $2.5 million design contract, and the subcommittee felt that we still had some work to sort of cement the groundwater project that we've approved a little bit of money over the last 2 years. So what we're going to do is similar to what we did with groundwater a couple of years ago, is allocate a smaller amount of money, $500,000, that will be broken into 2 years, $250,000 each year. And our consultant has come up with a 15-point scope of work that, basically information that needs to be updated from 2004 when we first started looking at a surface water plant. And so we thought this was a really a nice way to go. It's a sort of walk before you run type of thing. This is on page 2 of the CIP, and we'll be discussing that more in detail. But it would be worth a read of the details on page 2, and then we can fill in some of the information that's come to light in the last couple of months. So on to sewer. Oh, and then there'll be one vehicle. There was a Jeep, car number 51, and that is on the deferment list for FY24, and this decision was supported by the subcommittee. So sewer on tab 6, the budget book. Same comment about the GIS manager in administration. And we are down again, the water sewer manager, Steve Dalton being the assistant water sewer manager, and same description of the employee wellness program. And I'm trying to, I didn't ask you, Steve, about this when we talked, but could you, on the consulting services here, we're going down $7,000. I think I know what this is, but rather than guess, could you just explain what that is for? For Paul, if you know. I forgot to ask you about that.
I don't have everything right in front of me right now, Bob. Let me take a look at this and I'll get right back to you.
It's not a big deal. It's just that, I mean, there have been years when consulting is because of, issues associated with the new plant and dealing with nitrogen and all of that, that a consulting has been up around $25,000, $30,000. In fact, last year we spent $26,000 on a $12,000 budget. We're spending a lot less now, so if there's something in particular that we haven't had to do, it'd be worth maybe writing a note about it.
That's
Okay.
likely less work to do.
I will look into that and try to figure that out.
Do you want to back?
That's probably right.
You want to do benefits about it?
Yeah, I will. I just saw that.
Yeah, yeah.
So Russ had just said, during the whole, even though we had a permit, we built the plant out on Newfields Road, there have been ongoing permitting issues associated with nitrogen into the river. And one of the CIP items is the Great Bay nitrogen permit, more of a global, permit that all towns on Great Bay had to sign on with. And as Russ articulated, that we're sort of at the ending of those negotiations and everything, and the permits in place and all that, so that our consultant needs are significantly less because we haven't.
Hallelujah.
Doesn't mean they won't return.
No, but guarantee that. You can guarantee that more than employee succession plans.
Yeah.
Okay, so new health insurance for admin, Corey?
Sewer administration health insurance, $72,781, 72781. Dental insurance, $5,492, 5492. Life insurance, $271. Long-term disability, $540. And then workers' comp insurance, $5,453, 5453.
And new benefits?
$146,759, 146,759.
So moved.
No, we don't have to move that. It's benefits.
Sorry.
Not a problem.
Getting late.
So again, the property insurance, Primex is our insurer of equipment with the new facilities and everything we have around town, and the work on Webster Avenue and Court Street pump stations, newer equipment, newer facilities, higher premiums.
A couple new numbers there too, thank you.
Sure.
Under fleet insurance, 55124, $876. And then 55228, property insurance, $91,018, 91018.
Okay. Any other comments or questions in administration?
Well, I had marked in my book, I have question marks next to the line legal expense 55170. And now I notice, of course, that the note related to that is the EPA permit note. So now I'm kind of confused because we were just earlier talking about a different line about the EPA permits.
Well, the consultants are engineering consultants and legal is attorneys.
So it's all speaking
Unfortunately,
to the same.
when you deal with the friendly folks at EPA, you need to have attorneys in tow.
Yeah, as it says, you can see the note on the right-hand side, parentheses, is this a relevant comment? So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that.
That is a relevant comment, isn't it?
It is. Yes, it is.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to guess
So just as you characterize it, one is the engineering consultants and the other is the legal aspects of the Great Bay.
Yes.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Yep.
Got it.
So if Steve is looking for somebody to finish off that meals expense line, take me out to lunch anytime.
Yeah, that's
Over there.
I think a couple of years ago, there were.
A lot of Lexi's. And memories too now.
That's actually an interesting observation, because I have a feeling because we had, again, a public works director and a managing engineer, and now with being down people, Paul and Steve don't have enough time to go to conferences. Cut the budget.
Don't worry about any education.
That's exactly right.
I always hate to cut educational training opportunities, but it's probably worth keeping.
They're going to need it.
Probably keep an eye on that.
Yeah, the industry's going to invent something we haven't had a chance to go to find out and see what's new. Exactly.
Plus, they're going to need to get.
So a new general expenses number, Corey.
Sure, 122,695, 122,695.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the expenses?
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
That was good.
As promised.
As promised.
We're getting there, though.
Chris has a 2-hour limit with these meetings. And
That's with candy.
That's with candy. So total sewer administration fund, Corey.
564,652. 564,652.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Billing, similar to on the water side, we really didn't have any changes. Most of the increases were due to allocations from either Gatsby or IT work. So new benefits numbers, Corey?
Yes. Health insurance, $28,031, 28031. Dental insurance, $1,869, 1869. Life insurance, $92. Long-term disability, $113. Workers' comp insurance, $1,271, 1271.
And total benefits?
$51,477.
Thank you. Any questions on any of the items on general expenses? So a new sewer billing number, Corey?
208,260, 208,260.
I will move that amount.
I will second it.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Collection. So let's do the insurance numbers here.
Sewer collection, health insurance, $88,568, 88568. Dental insurance, $5,646, 5646. Life insurance, $184. Workers' comp insurance, $10,132, 10132.
And total benefits?
$161,338, 161,338.
Thank you. So there are a number of items here in collection that the subcommittee wrestled with. Again, trying to line up historical spending and proposed projects with what the current budgets are. And, trying to avoid nickel and diming the department, because over the years, sometimes they have had to tap into these lines, but it does not appear that there's a recent history for a number of reasons. A lot of the road repairs in particular have been taken care of under the paving budget, as we've been doing a lot of utility work, again, as articulated over the last few years. So starting with road repairs, the department requested an increase to the budget of $20,000 last year. a lot of the work has been taken care of under the paving budget as part of overall utility work. Very small amount that's expended, I think is it still $252?
290.
190, okay.
290.
290. So again, we could obviously try to get a little cute, but we thought that at least we would get down to $10,000 on the road repairs. And then similar with II abatement, many of you may recall 4 or 5 years ago, we embarked on a very aggressive plan to reduce infiltration and inflow by repairing manholes and sewer lines that ran across country in open fields and things like that. We've done a lot of that work, and so we haven't had to do a significant amount over the next, or over the past year or two. Again, not wanting to go down to zero because the department still has various projects and catch basin work over the year, but we haven't spent any, we didn't spend any last year, we didn't spend any so far this year on II abatement, so we would recommend that being 10,000.
5,000.
5,000, sorry.
Bob?
Yeah, Amanda?
The catch basins there, how do those differ from the catch basins on the general fund? The DPW general?
Those would be drainage catch basins. Catch basins with the grates on them, or catch basins that tie together the drainage lines, those would be under the general fund.
Okay.
These are catch basins associated with sewer manholes. That are, and the sewer lines are separate from the drainage lines.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yep. So I guess before we get too far afield, so road repairs, the subcommittee, on behalf of the subcommittee, I recommend a budget of $10,000, down from $20,000 on that line item.
And I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Good job.
II abatement, I would move a budget of $5,000 for that.
And I'll again second it.
Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Pipe relining. So here, a couple of things on this. So the budget on this is $40,000. The intent was that there is a, well, that's been sort of the line for a number of years. This year, it was specifically allocated to a project associated with the Pine Street, Front Street Rotary near the Exeter Inn that the town approved this past March. And that project still needs to happen, that pipe relining project. Nothing has been spent so far to date, and there's nothing really on the books in the next year for pipe relining projects except for this project. So our thought was that we would, and Steve Dalton, you can feel like you can weigh in at any time, but after our discussions, he's indicated he's going to try to encumber, get a contract in place before the end of the year for this $40,000 in FY23 that would then carry over for the work in the spring of '24. And then the subcommittee would recommend revising the budget of this line to $5,000. If by some bad luck we are not able to encumber that money, we'll have another couple of cracks at revising this line item accordingly so that the work can get done. But hopefully, is that a fair description of our conversation, Steve?
Yeah, yes, it is, Bob. I actually got in touch with the vendor that does the relining. He just emailed me at 7:10 tonight saying that he will be in town shortly to go over what plans we have for that intersection project. I'm not sure what that quote's going to come into yet. I don't know if the $40,000 will cover the whole quote, the whole project. I should know better fairly soon at this point now that he's going to be in town relatively soon.
Difficult.
Well, why don't we, what I would like to do then, and Corey's indicated that is, as long as we can get a signed contract before the end of the year, that we can encumber the $40,000 into next year. I think the subcommittee feels like, based on the recent history, 5,000 is a more realistic number in the absence of any specific projects. However, again, if it gets to be January 1st, there is still the select board public hearing on the budget, as well as the deliberative session to adjust this line item if need be. Is that a reasonable strategy, Russ?
It sounds reasonable to me. Yeah.
And just for clarity, Mr. Chair, the only reason why this appears in both the 2023 and the 2024 was because to date it had not yet been spent in 2023. We weren't sure it was going to be able to happen before the end of 2023, so it was originally written into 2024. Do I have that right? Or was it originally the same plan?
My understanding is that that 40,000, well, again, it's been 40,000 because back, a number of years ago, we used to, like a lot of projects, try to do one every year.
Okay.
And again, with other projects going on, contractor shortages and staff shortages, we haven't. But this 40,000 was allocated for that Pine Street project.
Okay.
The folks on the sewer end had indicated to Steve and Paul that that would be done as part of that work. That's a fair statement, right?
Okay.
And it's
going to be, and so it's just a question of hopefully getting it, because we have the money this year of allocating that for next year.
Just one more quick question, just a point of clarification. That was a warrant article, that intersection, right? So
Correct.
Was this money already baked into that warrant article, or
no?
So we're not.
That is for just the, let's say, above ground improvements.
Okay.
And while we were out there digging around, playing in the dirt, the sewer folks said, geez, there are some limitations there, let's fix this pipe while we're there. Again, that's a
strategy.
That's what happened the way Bob explained.
Okay. All right, good. We're digging up the street, might as well fix the pipes.
Exactly. And it's a critical intersection. We don't want to be messing with that intersection again, although I think it's quintessential New England myself. I'm happy to go with a rotary. Tom.
A question for Paul. I mean, not to get into the weeds on engineering, but we're talking about relining an existing or old pipe underneath a brandy new intersection. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about.
And that is the most practical way to go, rather than laying a new pipe before we put all that paving down, or not?
Yes, this will work. It'll be a lot cheaper this way too.
It'll work.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it'll be cheaper.
It'll be cheap, exactly.
Okay, so on behalf of the subcommittee, I will move a new budget for 2024 for pipe relining 55369 of $5,000.
I'll second that. Did you first it?
I did.
Okay, I'll second.
And again, with the understanding, hopefully between Corey and Steve, keep me in the loop on that, so that if we have to go to the select board and change that, we will do that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The other CSO monitoring, I guess, again, because of some of the scheduling issues we had before, there was there's a discussion in the note about some notifications and communications that needed to happen, and I guess we didn't, as a subcommittee, there's been about $9,000 spent so far on this line, and we, I guess, weren't really made aware of the need necessarily to bump that up by $5,000. So if between Paul and Steve, maybe you could provide some input on that, but as of right now, we didn't see that.
So we have two CSOs 2 CSO manholes that are required to be monitored if there is a CSO event. With the new NIPD's permit coming into that's already in effect right now, we have to provide public notification within 2 hours of any CSO event. Currently, historically, we've had 24 hours to make that posting, so it could be done manually. But we're looking to automate that because if a CSO happens at 1 o'clock in the morning, we only have 2 hours to get that posted online. And the vendor that we use to monitor the CSO manholes now has the capabilities of working with the town's ID department to get this linked in so that we could have immediate public notification. So it is a part of the NIPD's permit for the wastewater treatment facility.
Any questions? So is the year-to-date, the $9,000 year-to-date, is that specifically to the contractor who does the monitoring? Or have we had any, because we haven't had a CSO event in a while, haven't we?
That's correct. We haven't had a CSO event in a while, but we are still required to monitor them 24/7. And they bill quarterly. So that's why that full money will be spent before the end of the year.
Yeah, I get that.
I think I just paid an invoice for them last week.
And as a point of clarification, Steve, does that mean we're going to be paying $18,500 annually going forward to fulfill this mandate?
Yes.
No, that's not true.
Yes.
We'll be spending $13,500 for the maintenance and the monitoring of CSOs.
Okay.
The $5,000
is for the additional.
If we have an event of, again, sort of funding an IFCOM and something that hasn't happened in several years, of being able to do that quick turnaround. But I mean, with everything being online and automated, it seems like a lot to take an event and post it somewhere, something that hasn't happened in several years. I mean, what exactly do they have to do for notification? Put it out on
It's part of our NIPD's permit. We have to put it out that the CSO had started. We have to post right away that it has started. And then once it has completed, we have to repost. And that part can be done manually, the reposting of how long it lasted and how many gallons got discharged into the Clemson Pond CSO holding pond.
Wow.
Just clarification. So you said that the problem is that if it happens outside of business or waking hours, it's hard to do. But if it happens, does anybody have to go to see it? Or like it just happens and it's getting posted?
Yes, no, somebody does have to go and see it. They'd have to collect a sample of that event. At least the first event has to be, one event per year has to be sampled. After that, it just has to be reported that it has happened and how many gallons, the duration.
So I'm just wondering, Steve, why that person can't manually put it out at that time, since they are awake and at it.
That person would have to have access to the town website. Typically, it's not given to just general public employees, the employees. Typically, it's more like what I have access to it to make the posting now, as well as the business manager at the DPW.
Write yourself a check for $5,000.
And it would be $5,000 each posting, or $5,000 to set it up, or $5,000 a year to have it available?
Annually to have it available.
As
for literally something that hasn't happened
whose spouse
ever.
does this for a living, it just seems like a lot.
Right.
Yeah. Like it's a simple
Again,
integration.
I don't think the subcommittees felt comfortable with that. You know, we haven't had it, we've spent literally tens of millions of dollars in the last 20 years of trying to eliminate CSOs and eliminate excess water in our sewer system, which we've done a great job at. We haven't had a CSO event, basically a combined sewer overflow event that would affect the river in years. And so I feel uncomfortable allocating this money to something that is probably not going to happen. And if it does happen, there's plenty of other ways to. I mean, again, we're talking about somebody getting access. The worst case is that you lose an hour of sleep by somebody waking you up and say, you got to post this on the website. Because it's not going to be Pam. You know, it is probably not going to be Tricia. It's going to be you. And so what's the cost?
Mr. Chair, I got to say, you know, however, conversely speaking, here it is, you know, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, everybody's away, and an event happens, and none of the right places people are in place to respond to it manually on the notification. And let's say it's one of the biggest events you've ever had or anything like that, and it's impacting the river. I think a $5,000.
But how does the $5,000 help us? Because this person or this contractor that's doing this won't have access to the website,
no,
as I understand it.
No, but if I understand this correctly, the $5,000 is an automated notification, right? That's what I understand this to be. So that
to where?
To the town website or our Facebook page or whatever is required to drive that.
So an ability to automatically post something to the website, even if you don't have.
Well, through this, my understanding is through the service.
Right.
But my question is, why can't, have we discussed between the sewer department and the ID department another way to automate that? Because it doesn't sound very hard to me.
Yeah,
I would agree.
I agree with that.
As a
Paying an ongoing fee for like a one-time
Yeah, maybe.
integration.
It's a,
Ton.
yeah.
Also, Paul, or maybe Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't one of these potential CSO sites going to be very shortly serviced by new siphons?
No.
No.
Okay.
There's a siphon
There's a
there,
separation,
but
that's separate.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why I'm asking.
They're in the vicinity, but.
They're exactly, okay, but, okay, so that doesn't directly, the siphons do not directly address this issue.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I think that having it be automated is important. I just think that having it be automated, it's easy, and to spend $5,000 a year for the next 50 years seems difficult to swallow. For something that I wonder if we could just integrate a conversation between departments about doing it an easier way.
That would seem to be, since this just recently became a thing, it seems like we can work with the IT department and come up with an alternative scenario.
Just say worst case scenario, we didn't get the notification out.
Exactly, what would happen?
Is there a fine or what's the downside?
Well, they always say there's a fine, but.
There could be through EPA.
There could be.
Yeah.
It's
Probably get a warning
there.
first, though, the first time, and then a fine.
There are more guidelines. Well, like I said,
I like it.
The recurring nature of this
without trying to be
really.
too facetious, the subcommittee
It's the
recommended
recurring.
level funding this and trying to find a different, now that we have some more clarification on what this is, I think, I'm not speaking for you, but we're more resolved than ever to level fund this and figure out a different way for the posting if it even happens.
Yeah.
If that's a motion, I'll second it.
That would be a motion to
Second.
fund that at $13,500. Thank you, Chris.
Yes,
Further
thank-
discussion?
Thank you.
All those in favor of a budget for CSO monitoring 55543 of $13,500 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Chris Sigmund is opposed. Thank you. Motion passes.
Get another crack at it next year.
Okay. Continuing on down to manhole maintenance. Next item down, 55179, similar discussion of some of the items up above. We had allocated a lot of money over the years to replacing manholes, both on the drainage side as well as on the sewer side, and that work continues to be done. They're year to date of about $45,000. The department has suggested reducing the budget down to $50,000, which we don't need to vote on that, but the subcommittee supports that adjustment. And that's all the subcommittee had for collection. If anyone has anything else they'd like to ask about. Just an item of discussion that the subcommittee had, again, on electricity. It seems like the 105 is possibly a little high, but again, on the sewer side, it's so variable with flows that we thought we'd give it another year, just for some history and see how that goes, but we would probably have to take a look at that next year.
And that's a typo in the report? Or, wait, no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing.
Yeah, we're still on collection.
Yep, sorry. Yep.
Not a problem. So,
Before
collection total.
May I ask just for a second?
Oh, sure, Tom.
Sorry. One line above it, natural gas. I had that circled from our meetings. Can I get an expended on that, please, Corey? So this would be line 55194, natural gas. We're sort of level funding at 15,000.
Yeah, so we're at 10,500 to.
Sorry, say again?
10,500 to.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah. All right.
So it's likely you could get there.
Yeah, so that's tracking pretty reasonably.
Yeah.
So a new collection total, Corey?
Yes. 730,289. 730,289.
I will move that number.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Opposed.
Chris is opposed. Thank you. Okay, treatment, page 4. So can we do the health insurance numbers, Corey?
Sure. Health insurance, treatment, 141,814, 141,814. Dental insurance, 9,160, 9,160. Life insurance, $252. Workers' comp insurance, 10,135, 10135.
And total benefits?
$239,084, 239,084.
Okay. So on equipment maintenance, 55105, the subcommittee looked at both the history, which jumped pretty dramatically with the new facility in 2019, but and again, a lot of our budgets at that time were based on estimates by the consultant who designed the facility, and we've got, again, we hired, as you recall, we hired additional very qualified staff to run this state-of-the-art facility. We've, in fact, been, I think, Russ, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've met our 5-year goals, in 3 years, is my recollection. We're down to, we were supposed to be at 5 milligrams per liter on nitrogen, and we're regularly at 3. So we've, gone over above. Our operators have done a fantastic job of basically helping us clean up the river quite nicely. But coming along with that is a lot of the maintenance and parts and supplies requirements have actually been a little bit less than originally anticipated. So you'll see in equipment maintenance, the department is looking at a $27,500 reduction. The subcommittee thought that $100,000 was actually more of a, based on the recent history, a reasonable budget for next year. And I think we talked about this, Steve. Is that still a reasonable number, or are there other things that we're missing?
We talked about this a little bit. I do have a little bit of concern. I mean, the facility is 5 years old. $100,000 may be all right for this coming up year, but as the facility ages, we may look to revisit to go up with that in the future, just because some of these components obviously cost money, a lot of, quite a bit of money as things need to get replaced and maintained.
We would fully support that and feel, again, what we're just trying to do is get a line, sort of readjust what the consultants told us in 2018. And if things do continue to increase, I think we would have no problem supporting that. But for now, it looks like, 100,000 should be plenty based on recent and existing expenditures.
I have a question for Steve. Sure. Steve, so my rough understanding is that some of these pieces of equipment are very expensive, right? So if something breaks without notice, then you're out a lot of money on very short notice, correct?
That is very correct, yes.
And so I guess my question is, how the hell do you budget, how the heck do you budget for that? I mean, because is there a maintenance, do you wait for something to break and then replace it? Or is there a maintenance schedule to these particular pieces of equipment? How are we going to do this going forward?
There are maintenance tasks associated to every single piece of equipment in that facility, and try to keep a record of where it is in its useful life. But that's not to say that one little pebble can't fall in the wrong place and wipe out, like the centrifuge, for instance, and that would be a fairly expensive thing. It's hard to foresee the future, just like everything that you guys have been saying. There's a lot of what ifs involved.
That's what I get.
I just want to ask Steve. So Steve, you're not comfortable with 100,000? Do you think that's too low?
We had discussed it internally previous that we thought the 147.5 was a little bit high, and we thought that the 120 was reasonable, just in case something bad did happen this coming up year. I'd be more comfortable with the 120, to have the funds available if something was necessary quickly.
Thank you.
What we ended up looking at, again, the plant was online fully in 18. This line was somewhere south of 50,000 until 21, when it was 65. It was 79 last year. So again, our thinking was with with another year older and a 5-year replacement program that 100 was another 25% on top of what was spent last year. So that was where the number came from. It could really almost be anything we want, because we just don't know. But
yeah, exactly.
We were just trying to go in the progressions of what's happened recently.
Yeah.
I like the 100,000 number.
I'm sorry?
I like the 100,000 number suggested based on the historicals and whatnot.
Yep. That was sort of our thinking. So on behalf of the subcommittee, I will move a budget for 55105 equipment maintenance of $100,000.
And I'll second it.
Further discussion or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Thank you. Industrial pretreatment, if you recall from conversations in previous years, we have 5 decent-sized industries that have some very particular wastewaters that are discharged into our mostly residential system. And this money goes towards a contractor monitoring special industrial permits so that we stay in compliance with our overall river discharge and Great Bay permit requirements. There are revenue offsets. We do charge these industries for this, for the ability of us to come in and monitor their business. So there is a revenue offset to this. To sort of tie it into another discussion under lab testing, 55161. Again, Steve, we didn't talk in detail about this, but there's sort of a relatively new testing requirement for car washes. And that has gone up, or is anticipated to go up for next year. With the industrial pretreatment line being somewhat underspent, the subcommittee thought that since car washes could easily be construed as industrial dischargers, given the type of discharge they have, we thought that some of this effort of monitoring the car washes could be borne by this line item, industrial pretreatment, as opposed to lab testing. So that was, just to tie those two together and the rationale behind.
Yep, that's reasonable.
I mean, our feeling, I guess, was, and my feeling as somewhat in the business, is that car washes, given what they do these days, and I've inspected car washes from an engineering perspective, and they should be industrial discharges. So even though a lot of the soaps and everything are water soluble and all that, they should be monitored a little bit more carefully. So we're fine with the industrial pretreatment budget as is, and then going down to lab testing, 55161.
Bob?
Yes,
I have
Amanda.
a question on one of the above ones.
Oh, sure.
If you don't mind. I don't know if that's a better time. On 55337, I was just curious, is that including, so it's the invasive species control, is that including the Phragmites control, either of you? Paul or Steve?
Steve?
Well, back up with Phragmites.
Yeah,
It's a reedy plant that's super, super invasive, and I noticed, I went kayaking for the first time on our river, and I noticed there's a lot of it around the outfall area of the lagoons.
They like that nitrogen.
Yeah, they do like the nitrogen. We do have a company come in and treat for the Phragmites, some of the invasive species. I'm not sure if Phragmites are part of that program or not.
Okay, because I was just concerned that it does spread really rapidly, so I wanted to know if we are treating it before it becomes a bigger problem for us to pay for.
And if we were, is that where it would fall?
Yes, and is that it? Because it just seems kind of low for how expensive I know it is to get rid of Phragmites.
Yeah, no, I don't believe it is part of that program. I think that's more or less weed controls. We're required to maintain the lagoons, even though they're not really 100% in service anymore. And I think that's mostly what that is for.
Oh.
Not necessarily the riverbank.
Okay, so that where it is, it's not going to cause a problem to anything that we're currently using? Or we don't know what I'm talking about exactly in terms of the area where I saw it?
Sounds like a field trip to me.
Yeah, it could be a longer question, but I don't want it to become a problem for equipment that we are currently using or needs to eject in some way or pull in water in some way. I'm not sure how it works.
Yep, understood.
Am I to understand that this weed control is happening on the inactive lagoons, Steve?
Yes, so it's not, the lagoons are not 100% inactive. They are used frequently. As Bob had alluded to, we don't have CSOs anymore.
Yeah.
Because we have the capability of moving all the water that used to go to the CSO holding pond.
Yeah.
That goes to the wastewater treatment plant and goes into those lagoons still. Those lagoons are still active as holding for that excess water when we have heavy rain events.
Yeah.
And then we pump it back through the wastewater treatment plant to treat it before it gets discharged to the river. So they still are active in that manner.
Any further comments or questions on weed control?
Thank you.
Okay, on behalf of the subcommittee, I will move on line item 55161, lab testing, a revised budget of $120,000.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And just an anecdotal note on the electricity. Just doing some very rough calculations, understanding that we use more electricity, I think in the summer because of treatment issues than we do in the winter. But just doing a rough 12-month calculation, the number for electricity is probably more in the 210 to 220 range. But it's sort of close enough to where we are, and again, with it being a new plant, I think we still need another year or so to really fine tune this number. So we did not feel, we were thinking that with post-drought usage possibly going up, and the resulting wastewater usage, that we'll keep it at 250 for now, as requested by the department, and we'll keep an eye on it. So, general expenses total, Corey?
$1,027,700, 1,027,700.
I will move that amount.
I'll second it.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And a total sewer treatment number.
1,633,748, 1,633,748.
I will move that amount.
And I'll second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Debt service, pretty self-explanatory. Again, and one issue coming off this year, and 2 additional issues coming off next year. I will move the debt service amount of $4,192,569.
And I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Capital outlay, a little bit more straightforward for the sewer side of things with newer facilities, much less on the equipment part. Pretty self-explanatory. Most of it is articulated in the lease schedule on the that is in the CIP book, which we'll talk about a little bit on Thursday. Any questions or comments on capital outlay? Again, you'll see the equipment is relating to the air compressor described earlier. So I'll make a motion for the capital outlay budget of $170,906.
And I'll second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Sewer appropriations is not applicable. A total sewer fund budget, Corey.
$7,500,423, 7500423.
So moved.
I will second that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And very similar, CIP and vehicle discussion, the school street improvements and is on here. One item, and we'll talk in detail about this, but the septic receiving facility, we do have an existing facility out at the wastewater treatment plant. We are upgrading that so that we can have more like a more 24-hour service, which takes care of emergency pumpage and things like that. And
It's a revenue source.
we will, yeah, it is a significant revenue source. Basically, we'll pay for this out of cash flow in about 4 to 5 years, and then after that, it'll be mostly about $150,000 or more a year in profit. So it's a worthwhile project. We can talk about in page 32, if you'd read the write-up about sewer capacity rehab, that's currently in design. We had decided that our subcommittee is going to recommend that we would either do this or School Street, but not both this year. And we thought that School Street was probably more important, but we would entertain discussion on that on Thursday. And then Webster Avenue Pump Station, we'll get into some detail on that, but effectively what happened, the original construction amount was approved in 21, right, Russ, I think?
2020, I believe.
2020. And we're at the point now where we need to build it, but because of equipment costs and things like that, the cost estimate is a little bit out of date. We need to add $884,000 to that upgrade. And then on vehicles, we have the last Crown Vic in the country. It's on its third hand-me-down within the DPW on various functions, and it's recommended that we replace that with a multi-purpose truck with maintenance and plowing capabilities for the wastewater facilities. The subcommittee does support that. And we'll talk about that on Thursday. So again, our thanks to Paul and to Steve for meeting with us and then walking us through some of the other items. And also, I'd like to throw in that idea too, if you guys could convey really heartfelt thanks to your staffs. You guys do yeoman's work out in the field. And sort of keep things flowing, as they say.
Not bad.
So we're really appreciative of what you guys do. So Thursday night is our last scheduled meeting at this point. We'll be talking about CIP. Tomorrow I'll be passing around a cheat sheet of the items that we'll be discussing. There's about a dozen projects and funds that we are going to be looking at, and then some vehicles, many of which have been deferred by the management team, but we will be talking about this nonetheless. So Thursday night, 6:30, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
See you Thursday evening.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast Channels 6 and 22. Channel 6 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 8, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.